The wreck of the Old 97 was an American rail disaster involving the Southern Railway mail train officially known as the Fast Mail on September 27, 1903 while en route from Monroe, Virginia, to Spencer, North Carolina. Due to excessive speed and an attempt to maintain schedule, the train derailed at the Stillhouse Trestle near Danville, Virginia where the train careened off the side of the bridge, killing 11 onboard personnel and injuring 7 others. The wreck inspired a famous railroad ballad, which was the focus of a convoluted copyright lawsuit but became seminal in the genre of country music. Wreck. The wreck of Old 97 occurred when the engineer, 33-year-old Joseph A. Brody, at the controls of engine number 1102, was operating the train at high speed in order to stay on schedule and arrive at Spencer on time. Locomotive 1102, a 10-wheeler engine built by Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, had rolled out of the factory in early 1903, less than a year before the wreck. After the wreck the engine was rebuilt and served for slightly over 32 years before being scrapped on July 9, 1935. While the train was discontinued on January 6, 1907 this was not due to the wreck of the Old 97. On the day of the accident, Old 97 was behind schedule when it left Washington, D.C. and was 1 hour late when it arrived in Monroe, Virginia. When the train arrived in Monroe, it switched train crews and when it left Monroe there were 17 people on board. The train personnel included Joseph A. Brody dubbed Steve by his friends, John Blair, A.C. Clapp, John Hodge sometimes known as Dodge in other documents, and James Robert Moody. Also aboard were various mail clerks including J. L. Thompson, Scott Chambers, Daniel Flory, Paul Argenbright, Louis Spies, Frank Brooks, Percival Indermore, Charles Reams, Jennings Dunlap, Napoleon Maupin, J. H. Thompson, and W. A. Pinckney, an express messenger. When the train pulled into Lynchburg, Virginia, Wentworth Armistead boarded the train so at the time of the wreck, there were 18 men aboard. 9 were immediately killed, of the 11 men who died, and 7 were injured. Among the deceased were the conductor Blair, engineer Brody, and flagman Moody. The bodies of both firemen were recovered, but they were mangled so badly they were unrecognizable. There were several survivors to the wreck who believed they survived because they jumped from the train just before the fatal plunge. Among the 3 survivors was an individual named J. Harris Thompson of Lexington. Harris was a mail clerk who served on the Southern Railroad. He later retired on May 1, 1941. W. A. Pinckney, the express messenger who also survived went home, located in Charlotte, North Carolina, and immediately resigned after his life-changing experience. 2 other survivors included Jennings J. Dunlap, and M. C. Maupin. These 2 men did not resign and continued their work, although they started in new departments. Dunlap went to work on a train that ran between Washington and Charlotte, while Maupin worked at the Charlotte Union Station. At Monroe, Brody was instructed to get the fast mail to Spencer, 166 miles distant, on time. The scheduled running time from Monroe to Spencer was 4 hours, 15 minutes, an average speed of approximately 39 miles per hour. In order to make up the 1-hour delay, the train's average speed would have to be at least 51 miles per hour. Brody was ordered to maintain speed through Franklin Junction, an intermediate stop normally made during the run. The route between Monroe and Spencer was rolling terrain and there were numerous danger points due to the combination of grades and tight radius curves. Signs were posted to warn engineers to watch their speed. However, in his quest to stay on time, engineer Brody rapidly descended a heavy grade that ended at the 45-foot-high Stillhouse Trestle, which spanned Stillhouse Branch. He was unable to sufficiently reduce speed as he approached the curve leading into the trestle, causing the entire train to derail and plunge into the ravine below. The flames that erupted afterwards made incredible headway that consumed all the jagged debris of the wooden cars. It was very hard for the local fire department to extinguish the fire. Due to the fire combined with so few witnesses to the scene, the investigation that followed was greatly hampered. In the end it was concluded that 9 people were killed, including the locomotive crew and a number of clerks in the mail car coupled between the tender and the rest of the train. Only a fraction of the mail had survived, including a large case filled with canaries that managed to escape and fly to safety. Engine 1102 was recovered, repaired, and it went on to perform further duties until it was dismantled in July 1935. The day after the wreck, Vice President Finney made a speech where he was quoted for saying the train consisted of 2 postal cars, 1 express and 1 baggage car for the storage of mail. Eyewitnesses said the train was approaching the trestle at speeds of 30 to 35 miles an hour. The Southern Railway placed blame for the wreck on engineer Brodie, disavowing that he had been ordered to run as fast as possible to maintain the schedule. The railroad also claimed he descended the grade leading to Stillhouse Trestle at a speed of more than 70 miles per hour. Several eyewitnesses to the wreck, however, stated that the speed was probably around 50 miles per hour. In all likelihood, the railroad was at least partially to blame, as they had a lucrative contract with the U.S. Post Office to haul mail, the contract including a penalty clause for each minute the train was late in Spencer. It is probably safe to conclude that the engineers piloting the fast mail were always under pressure to stay on time so the railroad would not be penalized for late mail delivery. Southern Railway's Train 97 was in another fatal accident earlier in the year of 1903. On Monday, April 13, Train 97 left Washington, D.C. at 8 a.m. en route to New Orleans. As the train approached Lexington, North Carolina, it collided with a boulder on the track, causing the train to derail and ditch, killing the engineer and fireman. The locomotive that was pulling the train is unknown. Southern number 1102 had yet to be delivered to the railroad at that time. Ballad: The wreck of the old 97 served as inspiration for balladeers, the most famous being the ballad first recorded commercially by Virginia musicians G.B. Grayson and Henry Whittier. Vernon Dalhart's version was released in 1924, sometimes cited as the first million-selling country music release in the American record industry. Since then, Wreck of the Old 97 has been recorded by numerous artists, including the Statler Brothers, Charlie Louvin of the Louvin Brothers, Pink Anderson, Low Gold, David Holt, Flatt and Scruggs, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Johnny Cash, Chuck Ragan, Hank Williams III, Patrick Skye, 9 Pound Hammer, Roy Acuff, Boxcar Willie, Lonnie Donegan, The Seekers, Ernest Stoneman and Carl Brewer, Carolyn Hester and Hank Snow. The music was often accompanied by a banjo and a fiddle, while the lyrics were either sung, crooned, yodeled, whistled, hummed, recited, or chanted. The song rivaled that of Casey Jones for being the #1 railroading song of all time. The ballad was sung to the tune of The Ship That Never Returned, written by Henry Clay Work in 1865. Originally, the lyrics were attributed to Fred Jackson Louis and co-author Charles Neal. Louis claimed to have written the song the day after the accident, in which his cousin Albion Clapp was one of the 2 firemen killed. Louis worked in a cotton mill that was at the base of the trestle, and also claimed to be on the scene of the accident pulling the victims from the wreckage. Musician Henry Whittier subsequently polished the original, altering the lyrics, resulting in the version performed by Dalhart. In 1927 it was claimed that the author of Wreck of the Old 97 was local resident David Graves George, who was one of the first on this scene. David was a brakeman and telegraph operator who also happened to be a singer. Witnessing the tragedy inspired him to write the ballad. After the 1924 recording by the Victor Talking Machine Company was released, David Graves George filed a claim for ownership. On March 11, 1933, Judge John Boyd proclaimed that David G. George was the author of the ballad. Victor Talking Machine Company was forced to pay David $65,000 of the profits from about 5 million records sold. Victor appealed 3 times. The first 2 times, the courts ruled in favor of David. The third time it was reviewed by the nation's highest tribunal. The Supreme Court of the United States overruled the lower courts and granted Victor ownership of the ballad. Wreck of the Old 97 Inches is 777 in the Roud Folk Song Index. The ballad clearly places the blame for the wreck on the railroad company for pressuring Steve Brodie to exceed a safe speed limit, for the lyric begins, "Well, they handed him his orders in Monroe, Virginia, saying, 'Steve, you're way behind time.' This is not 38, it is old 97, You Must Put Her Into Spencer on Time. Popular culture, in Scarface, Anne Dvorak sings the song while playing it on the piano. During the late 1940s, a parody of the ballad was sung that mocked the ties that the folk singer Pete Seeger had to the Communist Party. The lyrics began, "Well, they gave him his orders up at party headquarters, saying, 'Pete, you're way behind the times. This is not 38, it is 1947, there's been a change in that old party line.'" An episode of the Suspense radio program, broadcast on March 17, 1952, and starring Frank Lovejoy, was loosely based on the ballad, which appears in snatches throughout the play. The facts of the wreck are changed, however, eliminating all but one fireman, all but one male car clerk, and adding 2 escaped killers. The ballad was referenced in the song Blood on the Coal, a folk parody song from A Mighty Wind, the mockumentary film from Christopher Guest. The reference seems to be a tribute to the ballad, although the wreck described in Blood on the Coal is an absurd one in which the train crashes into a coal mine. In the movie The Blues Brothers, the band is handed a list of songs to play at a gig. While the band is cleaning up, Elwood says, "Sorry we couldn't remember the wreck of the old 97 feet." A version of the song, by Ramblin' Jack Elliott, is part of the ambient soundtrack to the video game Sid Meier's Railroads. The popular alt-country band Old 97s take their name from the ballad. In Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Starlight Express, C.B. the Red Caboose claims that, among other things, the state police they don't suspect I got Old 97 wrecked. Kingsley Amis quotes from the ballad in his novel Lucky Jim. Lyrics They gave him his orders in Monroe, Virginia, saying, "Steve, you're way behind time, this is not 38, this is old 97, you must put her into Spencer on time." He turned around and said to his black greasy fireman, "Better shovel on a little more coal, and when we cross that White Oak Mountain, you can watch 97 roll. It's a mighty rough road from Lynchburg to Danville, with the line on a 3-mile grade. It was on that grade that he lost his air brakes. You can see what a jump he made. He was going down the hill making 90 miles an hour, when the whistle began to scream. They found him in the wreck with his hand on the throttle. He had been scalded to death by the steam." A telegram came from Washington Station and this is how it read: "The brave engineer who ran 97 is lying in Danville dead, so come all you ladies, you must take warning, from this time on and learn, never speak harsh words to your true loving husbands, they may leave you and never return." See also, List of train songs, MTA. References. External links, Mark Daniel Jones Witness of Wreck, Historic Marker, Wreck of the Old 97, Wreck of the Old 97 lyrics by Larry W. Jones Kingwood Cowboy, Wreck of the Old 97 song audio, biography of Fred Jackson Louie, audio and label of release on Hoen Records label.